Good afternoon to all and welcome to the 2025 edition of the ESCWA Insight series, which is a dynamic platform that explores emerging topics and innovative solutions shaping sustainable development across the Arab region. This series brings together top regional and global experts, thought leaders, and practitioners to share insights and forward-looking perspectives on critical challenges and opportunities facing our cities and communities. I'm Sukaina Al-Nasrawi, and I'm the lead of the Sustainable Urban Development Portfolio at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, ESCWA, and I'm really delighted and honored to moderate today's webinar on strategic foresight in urban development. Of course, discussing strategic foresight in urban development is more important than ever. As Arab cities, as we all know, face rapid urbanization, technological advances, and a range of emerging risks. Foresight enables leaders to anticipate trends, identify opportunities and challenges, and design resilient, inclusive, and future-ready urban strategies. Of course, supporting SDG implementation, the new urban agenda, and thriving cities for all of its residents. Today's Insight Series session will cover the fundamentals and practical applications of foresight, including, but not limited to, the definition and significance in transforming risks into opportunities, the key building blocks, mindset, context, methods, approaches to capture change and its impact, proven outcomes from, let's say, urban development applications, and a deep dive into foresight for resilient cities, exploring selected mega trends, key trends, drivers, and weak signals, and even scenario planning for multiple possible futures. We're privileged to have with us Dr. Judith Kozenkow, a distinguished expert in international economics, foresight, and sustainability. Dr. Kozenkow is project director at Horizon Group, a Geneva-based insights and research agency where she leads foresight and sustainability projects for governments, NGOs, and corporates. She also teaches international economics and foresight at the University of Geneva and Webster University, Geneva. Her experience spans developing and delivering trainings at UNITAR, trade and macroeconomic analysis at UNICTAD, and fellowships at the Graduate Institute, Geneva, and Hopkins University. She's also provided strategic advisory and risk management at the Hungarian financial sector. Dr. Kozenkow holds a PhD in economics, a master's in international economics, and certifications in strategic foresight, blockchain applications, and risk management. Dr. Kozenkow, it's truly an exciting session, and I invite everyone to engage actively and take away actionable foresight, actionable, let's say, insights for building resilience and future-ready Arab cities. And without further ado, please join me all in warmly welcoming Dr. Judith Kozenkow to the webinar. And Dr. Kozenkow, you have the floor for the coming 40 to 45 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It is really my honor and privilege to be here with you today on this session and have this opportunity to talk about foresight, which is very much also my passion to teaching and foresight, because I truly believe that this is not a luxury anymore to conduct foresight exercises and build it into decision-making processes, but it is an operational necessity of all stakeholders. There are proven facts that I will show you as well, what the results will also show us what you can reach with foresight from various fields. And then also I would like to, in the first part of my presentation, I would like to, yes, go and you see the next slide. So on the first part, I would like to focus on the foresight and strategic foresight, the building blocks. Why is it useful? What are the outcomes that we can reach? What are the methods and tools and frameworks, and how So also a little bit on how we can use those tools, what are the available tools, what's the process that usually goes through to a process or an exercise. And then the second, the other, we focus on urban development as that or an idea of and use the select megatrends, emerging trends. I draw on from studies and also research to look at also scenarios and also potential outcomes for cities and urban planning and urban development. We will also look at the case of Doha and their downtown rehabilitation project, which is also a well-known Foresight case in the end, towards the end. And in the end, after my presentation, you will also have the chance to ask questions. Happy to answer any particular questions related to Foresight and the case as well. So let's get started. And before I would like to also involve you and to get started with before I share the definition of Foresight, I would like to ask, what does it mean to you when you hear foresight? Because it also means a different words and terms in the various different languages we have. And that sometimes we interpret it as forecasting, but it's not the same. Right? So foresight is very much different from forecasting, which builds on the past and data from the past and extrapolating using the past data. Therefore, forecasting cannot create a new pathway, while foresight is there for us to create new pathways, right? And that's what we will see with human mind. So I believe with foresight, the AI might have a little bit limited space and humans might be still the center of it. So also, hopefully, I saw someone already typed in, but I hope this one works. I included this slide, or you can check the QR code with your phone. And then hopefully, I hope that we will see your answers live in coming up soon. So just a second on that, 10 seconds on that. Please, if you type in what foresight means to you, and then hopefully it will work. Also, I did the link in the chat, so you can use the link if you cannot click on it. Oh, great. So it shows up as well. Perfect. I will involve you in the second half as well with another question. So using Slido. So it's good to see that it's working. So we'll see this live coming up, the questions, and we'll see future scenarios. Great. That comes a lot for future events, predict uncertain events, anticipation, exactly what the future looks like, adaptability, pathways, being future ready, thinking outside of the box. Very nice, exactly. And I think most of you talked about future or mentioned future scenarios. That's why it showed up for us in a bigger, it shows up with the bolder cases. Thank you so much for adding your insights. And still one, long-term scenario planning. Exactly. So definitely these are the buzzwords and the terms, technical, even technical foresight terms that we use. Completely correct. And we will talk about also scenarios, future scenarios, because we need to also get used to talking about futures and not only future. One future, but term scenario planning, and think about also of these alternative futures and monitor those. Great, thank you for sharing. We'll leave time, and I will also share, of course, official definition. What do we mean by foresight? And also on strategic foresight. So when it comes to also international organizations and work on foresight, the fundamental foundations on the international level started already in the 1960s, 70s by the OECD. the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I will also use their strategic foresight toolkit. I will showcase that, and then also, of course, a little bit of my methodology and also what I've learned in other programs as well. So first, as you can see on the left side, it's also the definition used by the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Foresight is an invitation to think ahead, navigate a complex environment, and make decisions even though the pathway ahead is uncertain. And when it comes to strategic foresight, OECD uses this definition: is a structured and explicit exploration of multiple futures in order to inform decision making. These are the official definitions, and as Dr. Sukaina also mentioned in the introduction, it is more and more important because of the uncertainty, the interconnectedness, the complex world that we are living in, and the level of uncertainty is just growing, exceptionally growing and accelerating. Minute by minute, we face new challenges, new information, new technological innovations, new disruptions, so-called, and new also events, not only positive, right, but many as well, unfortunately, on the negative side, risks, challenges coming from the climate side. So we'll see about those megatrends as well. And with that, why still it is useful? What can we do when we apply foresight? As you can see, it refers to also the words and terms that you added in the Slido. So we see those buzzwords showing up when we talk about the importance of foresight. So with foresight, we can better understand of complexities. We can be more aware of change. I'll show you a tool for that as well. How can we capture and find the change or an event, a disruption, a trend when it comes to change, or the definition of change as well. Then informing risk assessments, the structural exploration of multiple futures. That's when it comes to those scenarios. Also to vision possible futures. So it's not only to prepare for what we may see it coming, but also we can envision and design our desired futures. Acting to create those changes in a good way, but also to prevent worst case scenarios by fostering resilience and preparedness. And I think this last one is kind of a summary and the conclusion. It's more important than ever to be more resilient and prepared for all the different kinds of crises that we face, from polycrisis to all other even types of crises and risks that we face. So foresight can make us more prepared, more future ready. I also would like to show you a few proofs, because we might say, yes, it's useful, right? It's, of course, it's also not a crystal ball, not about all envisioning the future, or it's not like a magic bullet, right? I always say it's a proven methodology that helps us anticipate the future and these alternative futures. And it's proven, there's studies now proven, multiple cross-country studies, and also on the business sector on when it comes to return on investment, there are studies showing results. Of course, bear in mind, this is one of the challenges and difficulties for foresight as well, and for all impact evaluation, right? We all face that issue when it comes to measuring the impact and capturing it with data and figures. The lack of information, the lack of quantifiable information is a challenge here. But as you can see, I added 2 points on the left side. You see the one on the policies. So what is captured so far by policy measurements or policy impact one from the Netherlands, when they measured, you can capture lives protected or saved, for example, during this project, the Room for the River, and where it's over 4 million lives protected during this project, where they also used foresight and scenario building to measure the impacts of potential floods. And then also again on flood and extreme weather events, the US flood adoption also calculated there the amount spent over the amount damage avoided, right? Expected damage avoidance, and they calculated expected damage avoidance of $1.75 over $1 spent. So, or even policies, we can capture proofs that foresight has an impact and has positive outcomes, even when it comes to costs first, right? And then we can measure the costs. It's harder to capture also the impact. And on the business side, there's also studies. I picked one. This was done with the most companies included, 83 multinational companies, including a longitudinal study that measures also the increase in profitability and increase in market capitalization over the over 7-year period, over 7-year time period. So the figures, you see the figures there also, 33% increase in profits and 200% higher market capitalization over this 7-year period for these companies who included already mature foresight practices into their operations. And so these are proven facts about the success of foresight. And I just would like to also show you a few front runners when it comes to countries and cities, and specifically cities. And then I just picked a few of different regions to cover up the world, and also your region, where we see countries and cities showing their potential when it comes to foresight, and they're using foresight. We know I'm sure you know of Singapore is also front runner or very much advanced role when it comes to foresight. And you see a few quotes from the countries that I picked, Singapore, because they have their Center for Strategic Futures, and they are in the forefront of using foresight. They also are famous for predicting, and then of course with foresight, also anticipating their preparedness for health crisis. And then when the COVID-19 hit, Singapore, one of the countries and cities, when they really quickly contained the crisis and the pandemic, because they had those pandemic preparedness plans as an alternative future scenario in their pockets, so they could manage to quickly react, and were one of the most successful ones to also contain the pandemic very quickly. And another famous policy horizons from Canada, and then from the UAE, where I also had the pleasure to work with those foresight visions. The impossible is possible, and I will share some others as well. Then when they really think ahead, even to 2070, or really long term, 30 to 40, and with a vision. Right? So creating envisioning the future and making it so-called design futures for the country and its citizens. And then also you saw the cities on the right side, just a few showing up over there. And we will use, I will pick Doha for the end, so we will get back on measurable impact and measurable outcomes when it comes to, for example, this smart, sustainable downtown regeneration for Doha, when they use foresight for various purposes. to test energy scenarios and climate-related, climate-resilient scenarios. And then the others can be also mentioned. I think we more know as well in Europe, Denmark, also Finland, others, Barcelona, testing scenarios as well. For example, in Tunis, they also had Foresight capacity building and also built-in governance Foresight into governance structures when it comes to planning. And also Cairo just recently, oh, sorry for that, switched. Yes, Cairo also used a strategic foresight exercises after the COVID pandemic to map and use this so-called, there was a big study also, our urban futures, when they looked at until 2050 various scenarios, and the COVID was an indicator for that, for example. So there are many city examples that we can see, and but now I also would like to go into the details. So what and the how. So how can we use what are the building blocks of the foresight? So when it comes to that, Dr. Sukaina just mentioned also in the beginning, right? These three main elements or key building blocks when it comes to strategic foresight, and they are interconnected of these three with the context, the methods, and the mindset. They also work in a circle. The context guides method selection, the methods shape the mindset, and then the mindset will improve how we understand the context. But when it comes to the context is the understanding the environment, the trends, and the forces, so drivers and signals that's shaping the future. It's the foundation of the site, and without it, even the best tools or mindset can be misapplied. Strong analytical skills help us also to integrate insights across the different domains. When it comes to the methods, next, those are the tools we use to anticipate and plan for change, like the scenario planning, analysis, backcast, also those. Using the right dependent context and also help us make sense of complexity. It's crucial. And also with the methods, we'll see there's various things and also frameworks that help us shape that process and select the methods. But these methods can be used to and tailor-made to your purposes, to your exact needs. Because in foresight, I believe there's no one size fits all anywhere, right? Anyway, in many policies, when it comes to efficiency, then it needs to be tailor-made. It needs to be personalized as much as possible. And with foresight, it is possible. Because if we look at and compare Doha or Beirut, cities, but when it comes to those trends, the mega trends, of course, that level will hit them same way. But then when it comes to the depths and we go deeper and deeper, you have those specificities, right? Even with the culture, even with different norms, and that can be integrated when it comes to that trends analysis and trend scanning, and then expert workshops where you can also build on the knowledge, of course, of the local experts of various fields, because that's also diversity is key when it comes to those selection of those methods and participation. And then the mindset, right, that's not to forget, because it is also key, this proactive, flexible approach that allows us to interpret signals and think strategically. Cultivating this mindset builds adaptability and long-term vision. And they work in circles. And with the mindset, of course, a little bit of practice we might need, right? Because first, when if you happen to also use Foresight or was invited potentially to a Foresight exercise, like a scenario building exercise or a blue sky thinking type of session, then first, it feels not certainly natural, or we try to, it's hard to step outside of our box, right? So it's sometimes it's really hard. And someone said in the slide or in the first question, right? Think outside of the box. Yes, exactly, right? So that's very crucial when it comes to this mindset. But with practice, we can all get there. And then just have also our open mind and, you know, bright thinking when it comes to these exercises. And this is also key when it comes to, for example, AI trying to give us certain new ways or new pathways. It's not, right? So we can think of new pathways, but when we try, I really tested also, you know, of course we use AI and test out AI tools to predict, and some parts of Foresight works with that, but some are not, right? So when we need to really think outside of the box, it's us humans who can do that. And innovation which still requires that human mindset. So let's move forward. And then we already mentioned the methods. So just a little bit about the methods, and I'll have a few also slides on the various methods to show you. And I'll also show you a framework, because these are just the different types of methods. And of course, it requires a framework or a process to use them in the right way. One way we will use the OECD's Strategic Foresight Toolkit. But before we get there, just a few notes on these type of different methods. Think about it as like a puzzle. You need, or like, you know, you have this toolkit, and then you cherry pick according to your needs. It's never one tool, right? Usually, and most of the cases, the best and the most useful is to start with a horizon or trend scanning or trend analysis, and then trend analysis. And you select, because that's what gives you what's now, right? So it frames the present, and also looks at trends, mega trends, but also specific emerging trends that are specifically related to your field. I'll show you that with the urban development part very soon. So we'll get there as well to see how it works when we select. Based on mega trends, we select trends, and then we do this analysis. And then with that, we can build scenarios. We can vision and backcast. And for the trends analysis, on next slide, just very briefly, this is how it can look like. It's just an example, right? With waste management, when you select what's right now, and also potentially the trends that we see for by 2030, but by 2040 or 50, when we can find those in publications. And then back to that. So on the next one, the backcasting I wanted to mention, right? Visioning and backcasting, when it looks like the following. You think, right, you envision that I would like my city to be net zero by 2050, or I need my country to be net zero by 2040. And then you backcast, you come backwards with a strategic mapping and the strategic roadmap, strategic plan. How can you make it happen by now, right? So we move backwards with a vision, from the vision that we are creating for decades ahead. And then others, of course, very popular policy gaming, simulations, and then designing futures as well. And design futures can look like this, right? When we envision those city images, those are by AI images done by AI, And you can see we can have a green oasis, or unfortunately maybe overheated, heat waved cities with protective shields. So we can really design and build cities. If you think of, for example, in the UAE, Abu Dhabi, Masdar city that was built along sustainability principles, futuristic, or also I did on the slide, there was NEOM, right, with the example that also built on more future-oriented principles, and like kind of a little bit you have this feeling when you walk around those cities. In Masdar, I've been, so that I can relate to. So these are the different tools, right? These methods that you can, like in the puzzle, as you can see, you can put them together in a puzzle. But how? Still how? So with that, I would like to share with you, it's a public report by the OECD. I find it very useful. It's a very also, was published early this year, 2025. So it's also up to date when it comes to those selection of those, the process itself, but also the selection of the disruptions. It selects 25 disruptions that we face, and then those can be used accordingly. So we will do that. I'll show you how to do that. So this is from the OECD Strategic Foresight Toolkit for Resilient Public Policy. This is the report. I will have all these links in the end at the last slide, and I'm sure you will, or I'm to share these slides with you after the session as well, so you can have the access to those references as well that I'm using throughout the whole presentation. And so on that one, as you can see, it's a 5-module process, and just very briefly, it helps. It is really designed for participation or for foresight practitioners or others, right? Not only foresight practitioners, but policymakers, decision makers of various sides, preferably for policymakers, to go through those steps. And first, in the first module, you explore diverse possible future disruptions and reflecting on their implications and becoming familiar with different domains and future possibilities. And then in the second module, you analyze the interactions between those disruptions, identify core assumptions guiding policy, and consider which disruptions could challenge those assumptions. And then the first and the second method builds into the third step or the third module, which is the scenario building. So creating different scenarios to combining disruptions, or that could undermine key assumptions, and identifying also vulnerabilities in current policies, and build coherent, plausible future narratives. After that, once we have alternative futures and scenarios, then in the fourth step, you select those you make action plans, but also select the most possible scenarios, assessing challenges, opportunities, and potential policy responses, policy necessities as well. And then the last one, that you translate all what we had into a strategy and an action plan or action steps. Strategy into the strategy and also into action steps. So we'll do that with urban foresight. But before we get there, just a few more seconds or a few more minutes, I would like to spend on more generically on the methods, because of course OECD is a very well-known international organization that leads this foresight field. But also there are many other institutes, agencies, think tanks that work on foresight with very practical, very useful tools as well and frameworks. And since I've learned here and there also of different trainings and heard from quite well-established foresight practitioners, why is it not going forward? Sorry, I'm trying. Yes, okay, switched. Didn't. Yes, just a few slides I would like to share with you, because when it comes to the, a little bit, it's the behind the scenes. So when it comes to those exploring disruptions or measuring the impact or creating those scenarios, then how it's done. So just a few slides on that. And then also, then what, right? So then how can we create a strategic plan or an action step? So this is of course getting a little bit more technical, but still those tools are available and can be learned as well. Many, what I'm sharing now will be or were developed by the Infinite Futures Institute and Dr. Wendy Schultz. I had the pleasure to learn from her directly and hear her many times, and her publications are also very well known, very practical, very easy to use tools when it comes to, for example, putting together a scenario. And then first, of course, it starts with identifying the change, right? Or this event or a trend or a disruption. There are many things how we can call it different ways, or the drivers or those signals, where those signals coming from. Actually, you see, this is the source of change. And when it comes to the maturity of the issue on that zone down there, right, that very early, when a topic is born, when an issue is born, that's where the foresighters might already catch that information, right? This might be a trend, or this might be a driver for another trend, or this is going to be a mega trend even. And so that where foresighters are always trying to catch information. And as you can see, as the maturity of the issue evolves, that's when other stakeholders step in. And that's when, if you see governments, institutions, right, when it gets the attention of regulators, authorities, governments, different other stakeholders, then usually the issue is already in a mature phase and more evolved, with more information on impact outcomes, potential outcomes for various stakeholders and regions or the whole world. So once we get there, that's when usually stakeholders, governments, city leaders step in, and that's what foresight can give us, to look very early on into topics that might be or need attention on, right? And then also, yes, this is, oops, sorry. So that's other than, and then once you capture the change, right? So you have a disruption or a trend or a driver. So you have this, then what's next, right? So this is next. For example, we have this so-called futures wheel, where you put the change in the middle, and then it can move into, you measure around the wheel. That's why it's called futures wheel. So the change is in the middle, and then you see the impact, right? You measure, you capture impact. If we have this automation in vehicles, autonomous vehicles might come into public transportation and mobility, in the autonomous mobility for cities, then what are the impacts, right? It might reduce carbon emissions. Of how much, right? You can catch, potentially have a measurement exactly on how much. Then also on increase the number of people will use, demand for transport might increase, and so on. So you get, and then you go the second circle, then the impact of that, right? What if we reduce those carbon emissions? Then what? And then third and fourth. So you can extend on those potential impacts with very specifically on the topic that you, on the event, the change that you face. And then you work around and measure the impact. It can be done in a workshop, right, with the expert, subject matter experts, or various different experts, or with the trends analysis can also help in here to capture very specific, even quantifiable impact. And then once you have this, then you might have another change, right? It's not only autonomous public transport, but it was A, but then you have another change, which is B, and then you also face another one, which is C. So you make those futures wheels, and then once you have all that, you will make it into, oh, why it's not, there's supposed to be a picture here, I'm sorry. So it looks, yeah, oh, there. So this one, right? So once you have those future wheels, then it can look like this very complex analysis of that very particular event, disruption or change in the middle. You phase 3. And then once you analyze all, it all connects and it becomes your scenarios. So Dr. Schultz called it Manoa scenario building because she's based in Hawaii. So that's where the name is coming from. But that's where those different scenarios will be together or will be created by using those various futures wheels. And sometimes you need 2, 3 futures wheels, and it still leads to only into one scenario. Take a while to get all that estimation, but once you have those, you're quite sure of, of those alternative futures, what happened if that future out of those 3, for example, here materializes. And the next, then how to create change. There's also just a list here on, as the final step when it comes to the foresight, you can create change. So there are different methods for different types of change, of course, and then also for different stages of maturity. With backcasting, that you already mentioned, is one of the tools. Early warning indicators, road mapping, that's also quite useful and well known. And then also, for example, wind tunneling, when we use alternative futures as a robustness check for proposed strategies, programs, and products. I'll show you also a few more in details. So that would be the first part of the presentation. I think this is a bit longer than when we look at the urban foresight part, and I would like to jump now to the urban development and give you a floor again with my first question. So what do you see as the biggest challenge or change for urban development in the next decade? So I'm sure many of you are here from the field of urban development. What do you see as the biggest challenge? If you can type in, and then we will see again the words showing up. We'll see, and then of course I'll show you megatrends and the trend scanning that I've done, also based on the OECD report, and of course other trends scanning exercise. So what is the biggest challenge or change? Right now we can call it a change, a disruption, or risk even, right? It depends on whether we look at it from perspective or optimism. Rapid ones that also mention, and we will talk, right? Rapid urbanization, green cities, shortage of services, including water, destructions, increasing urban population, inadequate housing, AI deployment. Yes, exactly. Those very much correspond, sustainability very much correspond with the so-called emerging or current trends that are also captured. Pollution, housing, right? Great with those, and we'll see one as a sample, as an example. soon. Thank you for sharing your insights as well. The gap, yes, exactly as well, right? The gap between the rich and the poor and the social contradictions. Absolutely, absolutely. One of the also social fragmentation, very important, segregation even, right? And then inequalities, increasing inequalities in not only economically, but even digital, right? The digital divide, very important. Right, so with that in mind, let's move to the next slide, and then scrolling through digital transformation. Great. Okay, the other ones were mentioned, building material market dynamics. Great. So we'll see with that. Just very briefly, I'm sure that you all are very aware of the key megatrends that influencing the urban development. So what comes now is that we apply this Foresight framework, right, or these Foresight steps into as a selected topic as urban development. And first, the trends horizon scanning, right? Trends scanning, and we'll do trends analysis. So with that, the megatrends will also drive you into those new futures or alternative futures that we can think about. With that, as you can see, urbanization, as it was also mentioned in the Slido, and also population growth and of course urbanization. I'm sure everyone knows around 70% of the population is projected to be in cities or in urbanized in urban areas by 2050, and also the other there were also mentioned AI deployed digital transformation. It is a megatrend. It's considered a megatrend, the digitalization and the advancement of various technologies, and then also climate change, right? The other one we can't deny, even if it's in short-term policies right now, it may not be the trend of the year or the buzzword of the year. It is the underlying one, right? That is also an upcoming. And in the next slide, I don't want to shock you, but I'm sure we know that we will also preparing now for the overshoot pathways when it comes to climate change and global warming. So it's not only the scenarios that we talk about when it comes to 1.5 Celsius degree or 2 Celsius degree, but more, right? Even if we right now immediately stop the carbon emissions and stop the global warming, it will still have this overshoot effect. Unfortunately, there's reports about that just recently, but also the Stockholm Institute has those reports for quite a few years. And then the other one, what you see on the right side, that's from the risks report, the global risks report of the World Economic Forum, where you also see short-term risks selected and also for long-term risks selected. And if you just see as well the colors on the right side, then the green, right? All the green in top 10 long-term risk. Out of the top 10, 5 is climate related, right? 5 are green, so that's popping up as well. But although we try to focus on short-term issues or other issues in the short run, climate change is an underlying problem, an underlying challenge that we will face and need to prepare for. One of the biggest ones, including with the others, right? The digital transformation and the urbanization in itself. And once we move on from the megatrends and the established megatrends, we can look at the ones that are the so-called emerging trends, the current trends that are more particular for urban development. So if you remember those charts or where this come from and the source of change, right, or also from the OECD framework, these are the ones that are OECD selected 25 disruptions, right, based on this horizon or trends scanning. They selected 25 disruptions. I selected out of the 25 the ones that are related to urban development, And plus also I added a few that are from other trends sources. So these are the ones where we can see specifically that are important for urban development. You mentioned also digital transformation, right? And then we have decentralized ecosystems, circular economy practices, nature-based solutions, climate-induced migration, aging urban populations, automation and AI in urban services, global supply chain disruptions, social inequality and urban segregation, just we discussed, health crisis, urban resilience, right? So those are, of course, with we can take a more deeper look, but also it could be just taken as a starting point when it comes to those trends. Once we have this as a starting point, then you take these trends, you analyze them, right? And we need their impact, or what exactly the impact would be to my city, right? Or for my region, or for my country, or even for my business, right? But many of all stakeholders. So you look at that from this perspective. And after that, I selected one just to have an example. What if we look at some circular economy practices, climate resilient urban planning, for example, for circular economy, to build a circular economy. And once we have this selected, I know it's getting a bit overwhelming here on the slide, but I just would like to just take you through the path. And with that, so you see how it is used. So you select that trend, and then you see what's the impact, right? So what is going on with that? Well, that's you see in the first box, right? Based on those climate resilient urban planning, if you use that. Then we'll look at certain numbers, certain trends, certain data. It's more about the method that I'm now sharing rather than the information, but of course the information is important, and I was looking at or selecting the MENA region for that and some of the cities around. And once we have that trends analysis, and you remember the futures wheel, when you add all your impacts, they can make scenarios. So in this second one, you see 3 scenarios, and green oasis, water-wise or tech-driven resilience. And if we take forward, we take one scenario, the green oasis, then after that, you make those policy recommendations, you make the specific steps. So what's next, how to create that change, right? Or how to make that happen. And it can become something like this, right? Policy recommendations, specifically action steps, including the stakeholders and including expected impact or output. So that can be specifically done. This is really just an example. I picked the green oasis and select. It's still not a general. It's not for a city specifically, but more generically for a city in the Middle East. And then this is how it can look like. You can make it into a policy recommendation and action steps for each of the scenarios. And then you can use those ones when you monitor which one is getting closer to reality. And then you need to always adjust, monitor, and update those scenarios when it comes along. And lastly, just an example I would like to share, and it will be also, of course, the various steps, but Doha as an example, the Doha downtown rehabilitation that was also built on these Foresight process and exercises with those measurable impacts and outcomes that they built in when they built that or rehabilitated this part of the city. As you can see, very much measurable energy reduction, solar generation, proportion of energy supply on site, LEED certifications, water efficiency, smart infrastructure, reduced car dependency, and decarbonization initiative. That is very detailed. And then just one last slide to see the Foresight process that I identified. So it's my identification actually based on the information available about the project. But this supposed or could be the steps that they went through based on the information that were available about the project, what steps they followed, visioning and long-term alignment with the Qatar National Vision 2030, and then the historical and cultural scanning, trends scanning based on that scenario building, stakeholder co-design with different stakeholders to involve, prototyping and piloting, institutionalization, certification of buildings, and then continuous monitoring and adaptation. And this is also a key last step once to scenarios or buildings, and then monitoring, checking on those potential outcomes. And this can be, of course, these informations are available. I just made it into this structure. So it looks like as the Foresight process that they went through. And just for key takeaways, what I would like to share based on the practice part that we looked at and also the case part is that what I mentioned, I close with strategic foresight is not a luxury, but an operational necessity when it comes to building those resilient cities. These specific methods could be carefully selected and fit to your purpose. And when it comes to building that mindset, practice, and really enhance your futures thinking, right? Or this futures mindset, get used to that terms, alternative futures. And also, we know as well that the application of the strategic foresight has a proven track record of success in policy and in business as well. But when it comes to those scenarios, the constant monitoring of those trends, drivers, signals, and then adopting the scenarios and policies are key for long-term success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Judith, for this very interesting intervention on strategic foresight in urban development. I mean, it may sound a little bit complicated to some of us, me included, so that I don't exclude myself. But I mean, learning about this topic starts with one step, right? So thank you so much. If you allow me, I'll recapitulate and to give the time to colleagues with us in the room and online to basically come up with their question. But I'll start with recapitulating by the very last statement you said, that strategic foresight is really not a luxury. It is an operational necessity to build resilient cities. I think we have by now a clearer understanding of what foresight is in general, and what are the different potential scenarios in applying it under the framework of urban development. Of course, Foresight, as you kindly mentioned, supports more resilient and future-ready policy design. There are many front runners. Thank you so much for sharing the experiences of Singapore, Canada, UAE, among many others. And in here, if you allow me, I just want to put different lines under the fact that it is not, I mean, when applying foresight, it's not just about the natural resources we have or the opportunities we have. In many instances, the only resource that is available is people. So basically, we opt for a strategic foresight to ensure that we sustain resources for them, we ensure high quality of life for the people. It's not rocket science, and it's not surreal. Already cities in the Arab region started to adopt that. As you kindly mentioned, going from Casablanca to Doha to Tunis, Dubai, Neom in Saudi, Cairo in Egypt, in addition to many other international cities. Thank you for sharing the building blocks of Foresight and how context, the mindset and methods really affect the affects insights across the different domains. And of course, there is no one size fits all. The framework of OECD is an interesting framework, and I invite colleagues and participants to pose questions. It's their opportunities now. I'll also thank you for sharing key mega trends, and it wasn't surprising to see the key mega trends that you've mentioned when it comes to urban development, going from urbanization, population growth, digitalization, and climate change. Of course, the examples you've shared is just an indication to how to put foresight into action when it comes to using the different scenarios and planning for different futures, and of course the know-how. I'll stop here. I know I won't be ever fair in summarizing all the wealth of information you shared with us. I'll stop here to just give the floor for anyone who would like to pose a question on any of the points that were mentioned so far. Maybe we start with if there is any question in the room, and then we move online. Is there any question?
Should we type it in the chat? Should we type our question in the chat?
I would ask also those available with us online to either type their questions in the chat or raise their hand, and then we upgrade them to panelists and give them the floor.
What was the question in the chat?
Yeah, I can't really see.
More. Just more. Q&A.
Yes.
I don't see. Hold on, there is.
Okay, so Dr. Judith, we have a question from the floor from Dr. João Tavares. He of course thanks you for the great presentation, and the question is, what would be the immediate first steps in very practical terms for developing countries interested in embarking in the Foresight journey?
Right. Thank you very much for the question. I think it is the most important, right? Then how to get started. So absolutely, very, very important. I think it's crucial. It's not only to little bit learn about this method, to run it on your own, because once you start it first, it might be a little bit challenging to run it on your own. However, this OECD report is quite useful and also has a practical guide as an appendix where you can also do or try to run this on your own. This whole process of building, these elements of those 5 steps. However, so that you can, of course, try that on your own. However, on very practical terms, the best, you can do many things on your own as the starting point with trends scanning or trends analysis. That's usually the starting point when you need to identify your problem, right? Your challenge, the change or this event, the disruption that you face, risk that you face, and that could be not only one, right? But identify 1, 2, 3 of the change or the challenge, the problem, and then after that you can do the change, the trends, the source or the awareness of change with the trends analysis or trends scanning. And actually that part of the Foresight, the AI tools can be also particularly useful because you can run search of publications that will share more information or summarize information on that particular topic. So you can analyze those trends and disruptions related to the change that you selected for you as a problem. So you make trends analysis, and then after that, right, you need to also potentially very useful to run an expert workshop or a session to also ask experts about that topic or that problem. That could be very hands-on starting point, but of course, if you are really doing it from scratch, I highly recommend to invite a first-time consultant just for you to build or to help facilitate first time the process. And after that, you'll be able to do it actually on your own.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Judith, for this. And if you allow me to add, I mean, always the context affects all of those starting points, especially when it comes to, I mean, it's for countries in general. So what about cities? Thank you so much for that. We do have another question.
Yeah.
We do have actually two questions. One is anonymous and it says, what time horizon is most realistic for foresight in urban development? Like, is it 10, 20, or 50 years? And if you can kindly tell us why do you think this is the most realistic time frame?
Right. Right. Well, that's quite difficult question in the sense that when it comes to also, even if we think about not foresight, but predictions, you know, the longer term we think, the harder it gets because it gets more complicated and we get uncertainty comes in a lot. As we get too far out, right? If it's 50 years ahead, then, but, right? So the thing with that, so you mentioned 10, 20, or 50 years. You can have different foresight methods for those different time horizons, because 10 years in foresight, it's considered still short to medium term, right? 10 years is still short to medium term, which can be made with scenarios relatively certain in foresight terms with alternative scenarios. When it comes to the 20 years, of course, then we move out, then the longer you make it, that still can be captured with trends, but more with megatrends, right? So 10 years you can capture with megatrends and trends. The 20 years horizon, it might rely on the megatrend because things will change and there will be new innovations that we might not think of right now in 20 years time, or scale up of certain technologies that we are now thinking that, you know, quantum computing, for example, right? One of it, the technology that might scale up in 20 to 25 years, but not necessarily in 10 years, or you never know. But it's overestimated, sometimes it's underestimated. It depends on the time horizon. And when it comes to the 50-year time horizon, that's visioning, right? So that's when it's long term, but then it's completely visioning and envisioning and design futures, because there, of course, there are no predictions that can, a few numbers, right? But even population growth, we never know what happens in 50 years. It might change, right? We now think that it's growing. It might reach 12 billion.
Absolutely.
But not certain. So over there, so it really depends. And the foresight methods and tools you tailor-made for 10 years, then 20 years, but with 50 years, it's visioning, right? That's when you just envision no uncertainty in 50 years.
Absolutely. Thank you for highlighting those differences. And of course, I mean, we're talking about uncertainties and planning for the uncertainties, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, which basically increase with the time horizon.
Absolutely.
So that's, but this idea of basically mixing methods based on different time horizons is basically to know throughout your answer. There is also, Dr. Judith, a question in the chat that says that, of course, thanks you for the fruitful presentation, but it's about how is strategic foresight, how is it linked to behavioral science? And whether it is essential to understand people's behavior in cities, of course, given the unequal access to resources and different other issues. So is it like basically essential to understand people's behavior in cities to be able to build scenarios and anticipate uncertain events? And thank you in advance for the answer.
Thank you so much. Amazing question. Actually, there's a tool even for that. In foresight, because it is very important, not certainly to be a behavioral scientist, but to capture, yes, the citizens' thoughts, values, culture, behaviors, norms, preferences. And we don't necessarily we don't necessarily need to be yourself a behavioral scientist, but that angle must be captured in the Foresight scenario that you are building. Actually, there's a tool for that to measure the different layers in the, it can be in the city, right? The different layers of knowledge, myth, people's behavior, and then what's on the surface, it's what's behind the surface. It looks like the iceberg. It looks like this is called causal layered analysis, CLA, causal layered analysis. But exactly what we see on top, it might not be the reality, right? So it has this huge iceberg, but the bottom is way bigger. So, and that includes exactly people's and citizens' preferences, norms, and the culture. That is the underlying foundations when it comes to change, because mindset might need to be changed if the change or your ideas or the scenario that you're building doesn't match people's thinking and preferences that might be hidden under this mini iceberg that's on top of the water. Then you might be in trouble when it comes to the execution of the change, right? So you cannot necessarily go and execute that policy because there will be resistance. So absolutely, and there is this specific tool I mentioned, causal layered analysis, that includes that to discover people's real preferences. Very important, because that will drive your change, right? The policy that now, after that you're introducing, it will be taken on by the people or it will be against, right? You can discover that. Very good point. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you so much, crystal clear. And I think this is one of the questions that take us basically to a tool that we did not discuss and note the wide scope of this domain. It would be great, Dr. Judith, if when sharing also your slides, if you can kindly also share this model so that basically we also make it make reference to it throughout the I mean for anyone who is interested.
Absolutely.
I don't see any additional questions or hands up. So I mean, we're doing great on time. I think we still have a time for a question or two. Is there any question from the floor? Okay, so we have a question from the floor from our colleague Hania, and then maybe I'll pose my question. Go ahead, just to speak.
Hello, Dr. Judith. Thank you again for the presentation. My name is Hania. I'm with the LPG team. My question is, I mean, you've presented frameworks, modules, and steps for applying Foresight. My question is, are these impacted by the domain? So when we're talking about urban development, when we're talking about digitization, when we're talking about populations, these seem to be very different domains. Would the frameworks and the modules be applied similarly, or would they be affected by the domain?
Thank you very much for the question. Very good point, right? Because the topic might affect the specific tools that you need to use, or maybe the order as well. Because sometimes with a very specific topic, the order might make sense to switch or add an additional expert workshop or other measurements, other analysis. However, the framework itself, these 5 steps, how you process things and what would be your outcome, then it is going to be the same. So that doesn't change. The steps, they don't change. Just the exact specific tools, how you capture the change, for example, or the challenge, how you make that trends analysis. It might definitely differ if you look at, for example, if it's a business and you are looking for return on investment, very specific numbers, of course, you will make a completely different trends analysis than for a city, right? When it's a city or urban development and urban planning or policy planning, then it will require a different type of trends analysis with different angles, different kinds of outputs, outcomes, and impact or expected impact that you would like to include. So the process as the framework could remain the same, but the tools, the steps that you make inside those buckets or those steps will differ based on the domain.
Thank you, Dr. Judith, for this clarification. And to be very honest, I'm very happy this question popped up because this is exactly behind the design of this session, where we wanted basically to start with a general approach to strategic foresight as it applies to all domains, and then zoom into urban development and the specificities of urban development. There are no other questions posted online, none from the floor. If you just allow me, we still have 5 minutes. So we want to basically make sure that we benefit from your insights and information to the last minute. So just two questions slash observations. So you've mentioned in strategic foresight there are different methods to use. So my question is that what foresight methods basically have proven most effective to use so far? I know there isn't a lot of practices have proven so far most effective in maybe identifying megatrends, weak signals, etc., either in general or in urban development in specific. And the second observation also slash question, in your views, is there any linkage between the successful strategic foresight and the cities that are being transforming to a smart and sustainable city? And we're only posing this because most of the examples shown are basically cities that are either smart and sustainable or moving towards smartness and sustainability. And I'll end here. Thank you, Dr. Zhu.
Thank you very much. Great points and questions. Let me start with the method, because it also depends on the context, right? Or it depends on which change or which challenge you face. But overall, I would say this is crucial to always have a trends scanning and a trends analysis. So the starting point must be always the trends scanning and the trends analysis. Without that, you don't have a clear picture on what's now and what is expected, or what trends we know, what could be potential expected impacts or outcomes of those trends. So that the horizon scanning and trend scanning and those specific trends analysis, I think this is the one that is crucial to have, and it cannot be excluded from any foresight exercise. And of course, when it comes to success, it's harder also to say out of the other. Of course, the other methods rely more on when it comes to envisioning. It's for longer term scenarios. In foresight terms, medium terms, and also for shorter terms, 10, 15 to 20 years. Those are also crucial now to think of those alternative futures and not just plan for one particular possibility that we might face, but because to run more in parallel in our heads, so with scenarios. So the trends analysis with the scenarios for short to medium term horizon. And the cities and smart cities, why or could be, of course, if we look at the megatrends, right, the 3 megatrends: urbanization, digitalization, and climate change, I would say the 3 together. So these that are towards the 3: urbanization, of course, but digital and it's resilient to being small. So this means that planning based on the megatrends that are underlying the foundations of all the necessary developments of the coming decades. So if you are smart in a digital way, but also being climate resilient, resilient, then together you will be succeeding.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Judith. We're ending exactly on time. So basically, we'll end on the note of planning based on megatrends. Thank you so much for your insightful intervention. I think you highlighted to us many concepts that we are still learning, and it is new to the region, which we will be helping cities and countries in adapting and to plan for the different possible futures. Thank you so much. This is the start of the cooperation on the topic with you, and hopefully we'll have different rounds of that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And exactly, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's use the same metaphor, because of course there's a lot to learn in each of the even using specific tools one by one for different purposes can be also learned. And I'm very happy to collaborate and join in the future for that. Thank you very much. It was my honor.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.